welcome to another episode of Coffee Talk with Encore. Today, we're going to be sharing information on ways in which clinicians can utilize online and other virtual clinical resources in their therapy treatment sessions. Well, there are so many resources that clinicians can access that are quick and easy to find, and they're right there at their fingertips. So with so many of these websites and resources being easily accessible, everybody should be able to find something that will suit them and their patients from today's discussion. Well, to start things off, I believe Ashley has some examples of technology and online resource ideas to share with us.
I do. And kind of like you said, Kathy, technology has really kind of integrated itself into our lives and our culture. So it would probably be expected that we as therapists kind of evolve with that and include these things in our treatment sessions. So being a speech therapist, the first couple of types of technology that I immediately thought of were communication devices, of course. So there's apps that we can use on smartphones and tablets. Apps like Tactus Therapy or Constant Therapy for language and cognition, but there are lesser known that I've come across even for speech therapists and other disciplines. There's a speech therapist who created an app called Epic. It's EPICC, and it's lesser known, and it's packed full of interventions for cognition, communication, just kind of across the board. And it does include like high-level med management. So it's not just for speech therapists. It kind of made me think of those workbooks that even when I first started as a clinician, that speech therapists used to carry around in a big old tote bag. We used to get our workbooks out and make those things functional. But being on an app, they're obviously less cumbersome. The patient can continue to work on those items even after we've left the room. We can assign home exercise programs, and they're actually functional. So, technology being so integrated in our lives, using that technology is just a really functional activity. So there's so much to choose from. It's always evolving, whether it's, biofeedback for exercises, creating simple educational materials from Instagram or Pinterest. I think even myself, I kind of underutilize those. But putting home exercise programs on patients and families' devices so they can access at home or wherever they are in their rooms. So even just doing a quick Google search, there's tons of blogs that show up to, rank the best PT apps, rank the best OT apps. So there's MedBridge Go for patients. There's a PT timer for timing those exercises and those stretches if you're assigning a home exercise program. And for OT, there's so many to choose from. The list was exhaustive. It was just so long. But like Flow Free, it really targeted like those visual components, which has so many applications to our patient populations that we address. And then, of course, fine motor coordination. So like I said, even just Googling apps for therapy, lots of different blogs, and there's so many resources for all disciplines on things. And they've already been created, and there are many free options. So I thought that was really interesting that, you can pay a little bit extra at times for certain things, in-app purchases, of course, but there are a lot of free apps and resources for us to use.
So I'd love to dive into the actual disease process and look for research on that particular disease and what the current trends are and what the best treatment approaches are. And so when I'm doing that, my thought process is always, have I treated a patient with this disease within the past couple of years? When's the last time I researched that disease process or the treatment trends for that pathology? And my rule of thumb, if it's more than 2 phones ago, it's time to look again. So some people go more than 2 hairstyles ago. It just depends on what you change more frequently. But if it's more than 2 phones ago, I need to look again because the technology has changed, and that means that the research has changed. So we start with those, therapy association websites. If you dive into the APTA, ASHA, AOTA, they have a ton of clinical research. Sometimes I'm a PT, I like to admit, sometimes AOTA has the better page. If you can't get into it, ask up here because they probably have the other associations. You can kind of cheat and peek at their stuff. Don't tell them I said that. But I like to peek at that. And then there's a couple others that we love to use. So we love the Pioneer Network for our dementia. We love Shirley Ryan Lab for those objective tests. And then that Direct Rec, if you're really trying to pull up some equipment and give some recommendations to your patient. But I also love to go right to the disease website. So if you're looking for a muscular dystrophy, if you're looking for cystic fibrosis, there's not only education on there for you as the clinician, but there's also typically printable resources for your patient. And so when you get on that website, you can pull that information up. And if you're anything like me, when you pull it up, I tend to print, that extra material and just leave it sitting on the counter so that the next person who's coming in to treat that patient might not have the time to look it up, but they're going to glance through that material as well. And, sometimes you can leave those medication do's and don'ts sitting around, and the nursing staff or the physician might take a peek at them as well and get that most recent up-to-date research. So it's just kind of that once you're already on there, share it with everyone on the team, and that way they can all benefit.
I love that. I love the thought of using all of these resources to make us stronger clinicians, to make our treatments better, like Ashley was saying. These resources can also be very, very beneficial for our patients when it comes to them knowing what we're hoping that they're getting out of therapy, understanding our recommendations. One thing that you touched on, Becky, was direct rec, and that's one of my favorites to use with my patients, because when I am recommending equipment and things like that, if I'm recommending a 3-in-1 commode, there are tons of different variations. Types of commodes might get confused. Maybe the patient needs a bariatric and not a standard. So with that direct rec, I'm actually able to pick the exact commode that I think would work best for them and send it directly to them with a link for either them or their caregiver to use. That way they're getting, exactly what's recommended, exactly what we feel is best for them. And by using these clinical resources online, not only can we print them, Becky, like you mentioned, and maybe, give them to the patients so that they better understand what we've been working on, the carryover that we're hoping that they get after discharge, but a lot of them we can also set up for them electronically so that they don't have to keep track of those papers, right? They can check something electronically. That way it's always there. They always have a copy of it. I am terrible with papers. I will be the first to admit that. Don't give me a paper. It'll be left in my car for a month. But if I have something on my phone, on my computer, maybe in my email, easily accessible, it's really going to help with that carryover. And I think that this would be good for our patients as well.
And isn't that the case? I think about, like, as you're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's more and more things that I'm thinking of also that I like to use and I resource. And I think that, like, many of us have our favorites list on our computers, where we've got, it's ridiculously long, all the favorites, and not everything can be a favorite, but anyhow, there's a lot of resources out there that we can use. And as we were talking, I thought of another one that I've used in the past, and that's HEP2Go. And so that website is www.hep2go.com. It's free to therapists to be able to set up home exercise programs for their patients. They can set up, not only the exercises, but the reps, and there's an image of what the exercise is. You can print those out. And I believe for a paid subscription, you can, download them and make them a little more, even more interactive than that. I think you can even email them or text them out to your patients as well electronically. So there's tons of options. There's objective tests, there's clinical programs, there's strategies for, implementing exciting and, interesting ways for our patients to participate in therapy. So tons of great stuff for sure. Well, as we've shared today, utilizing online and other virtual types of clinical resources can be a really fun way for patients to achieve their goals, while at the same time, they're providing therapists then a way to really spice things up in their treatment approaches. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and hope you've enjoyed listening in on today's Coffee Talk chat on the topic of online clinical resources. And we look forward to having you tune in again for our next episode of Coffee Talk with Encore.